Hey, I wanted to take a minute and talk to you guys about this video that a client sent me for commentary of a pretty common exercise that many people do, seated overhead dumbbell press for shoulders. Uh, the things that I talk about in this video we're going to apply for any seat supported dumbbell or bench press for that matter, but in any event, let's get to it. So here we see a lateral view. Alright, we'll let it roll through and we'll talk about it after a rep or two. So see if there's anything that jumps out at you here. May or may not. Okay, perfect. Well, I'll tell you what I see. What I see right away is an unsupported lumbar and cervical spine, thoracic for that matter as well. What I like to see, particularly with an overhead press, I like to see this bench back just a little bit, maybe a click or two. I don't like having the spine axially loaded from the top without any support, and here you can see that the lumbar spine, especially as the set goes on, is going to begin to buckle underneath that weight, and the shoulders are going to get closer to the hips. It's a lot easier to keep that supported when you've got the bench clicked back one or two, and the effect that the angle has on the activation of the shoulder muscle is going to be inconsequential for most people, if not all people. But in any event, you want to keep the lower back pressed against that mat, and you're going to feel an engagement in the abs here. Every exercise is a core exercise. This is just another example of that. Secondly, what I see, and this is for reasons that she and I have already spoken about, we see a slight internal rotation of the upper arm, and what that does is that puts the hand out in front over the elbow. And the problem that this creates is that there's a certain amount of resistance that the muscles in the back of the shoulder need to maintain in order to keep this weight from simply just dropping down to the floor. So angling that bench back would actually accommodate for that. That's from a tight and overactive subscapularis. If you've had a rotator cuff injury, then that sounds familiar to you. But clicking that back will allow more easily the wrist to stay over the elbow. You want it to stay that way. Now, what I can see from this angle, and we'll see it from the front for sure, is that the wrist is actually inside of the elbow from the front or from the back view as well. Alright, but let's let this play out. We'll see if there's anything else that catches our eye. So far, it's just keeping the back fully supported, the core engaged, and the wrist directly over the elbow. Okay, really not too much else we can see from this particular angle. So let's take a look at this from the front. Okay. And wait for it. I don't know why it's choppy like that, but what we can see here is that, again, the wrist is inside of the elbow, and again, there's certain muscles on this side of the arm that have to maintain tension in order to keep this hand from dropping inwards. Oh, get out of there. Okay, we see a little bit from it this side too. Now, when we were looking at her before, we saw this looking at it from her right side. And so whatever manifestation you see here is really just the front view of what we saw going on in the side. We'll let this play. There's one other thing I want to point out at you. See if you can figure it out. You can see it right at the top of the movement. Okay, we'll call that the top. And what do we see? Okay, we see the hand. When we're at the top of the movement, we really want the hand to be over the elbow, which is directly over the shoulder. I don't know why that keeps happening. Okay, and here we don't see that. We see that the elbow is still flexed. Now, the reason for that is, my guess is going to be from an overactive and tight bicep, which is just constantly pulling on this part of the arm, forcing that elbow to stay flexed. Okay, a lot of people have this problem, especially if you have a job where you're seated all day long, or you spend extended amount of time sitting with your elbow flexed. Over time, your body accommodates for that posture, and inevitably muscles will shorten and muscles will lengthen to make that a more economical and efficient posture and movement. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the weight is too heavy for her. And again, she and I already spoke about it. What I would say is that if it's the weight that's prohibiting a complete lockout at the elbow and getting those hands directly over the elbows, directly over the shoulders, then yes, then the weight is too heavy. But that's what I see mostly from the front. Now, we had talked about it before from the side view, that if she had her abs engaged and her lower back pressed against the pad, all right, her six-pack would be engaged naturally. She'd have to have her chest up in order to keep her neck back against the pad as well, all right, and that would also disallow her a certain amount of body English here, where you can see she's really pushing up with that left side. We've got a little bit of asymmetry here, which is what we always want to look at. It's probably the single most important thing that we can look at when we focus on ourselves in the mirror or watching a video of ourselves doing an exercise. Is it symmetrical from the front, from the side, from the top, from the bottom? Is it symmetrical? If it's not symmetrical, every effort has to be made in order to make that movement symmetrical. Otherwise, there's an uneven distribution of the load, an uneven distribution of the forces, and that just causes problems, if not immediately, then certainly down the line. So keep an eye out for that. What were the things that we saw? Well, first of all, from the side, we want to see, and from the front, we want to see the wrists. Get out of here. Alright, I'm not going to try that. Anyway, 1, we want to see the wrists directly over the elbows from the side and from the front. 2, we want to absolutely keep it that way for the entirety of the movement, through every moment of angle, through every inch of range of motion. Forearms stay vertical, perpendicular to the ground, wrists over the elbows, over the shoulders when we lock out. Number 2, abs tight, neutral spine, neutral, secure spine, from cervical, thoracic to lumbar. That curve's got to be there and it's got to be locked in. And finally, symmetry. Absolutely critical. That is the first thing that I look for, or I look at whenever I am evaluating somebody's form or somebody's performance, and it's the first thing that we need to correct. So keep everything symmetrical. It's a whole lot easier to do that when the core is tight. You might have to back the weights up just a little bit, but symmetry prevails. Okay, symmetry prevails. Give that a shot, incorporate those tips into your next workout, and let me know how it goes.